Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the center of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm honored that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
If you look at the research around the rate of change and our ability to adapt to it, the rate of change is way higher currently than our ability to adapt. And, all signs point to the fact that the rate of change is going to continue. Hopefully it's not another pandemic, but certainly it will be something. And so, to lean into our ability to adapt and manage change, to me, it's the most important skill. It's the most important skill because it's what we can count on, right? And we can count on continued change.
Welcome back. I hope your week's been awesome so far. If you haven't listened to my recent conversations yet with author Ed Cressy and with Maxwell Nee of High Performing Coach, then go listen and check them out. Only after you've listened to today's conversation, of course. I'm really excited today to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest, Michael Diettrich-Chastain, the CEO of ARC Integrated, an organizational consulting and professional coaching practice. Michael is a best-selling author, a leadership coach, a facilitator, and a speaker. He and his team are passionate about helping organizations, leaders, and teams achieve and maintain peak performance. Through a focus on employee engagement, change management, communication, and emotional intelligence, Michael ensures that the leaders and teams he serves improve culture, improve impact, and profit. His writing has been featured on Time, Money, Entrepreneur, and The Washington Post. His new book, Changes, The Busy Professional's Guide to Reducing Stress, Accomplishing Goals, and Mastering Adaptability, released in 2019. In our discussion today, Michael talked to me about the predictors of our ability to create change. We talked about finding the balance between learning new things and implementing. And we talked about why it's important to continually improve our ability to adapt. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Michael Diettrich-Chastain. Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome today to the InnovaBuzz podcast, all the way from Asheville in North Carolina, the USA, Michael Diettrich-Chastain, who's a best-selling author, a speaker, a change agent, dedicated to peak performance. He's the CEO of ARC Integrated, an organizational consulting and professional coaching practice. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Michael. It's a real privilege to have you as my guest.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, pleasure to be here with you.
Laura Pennington-Briggs, who was our guest on episode 252 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we have a conversation with you, Michael. So big hello to Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Hello.
Now, you help leaders, teams, and organizations create and maintain peak performance, and you do that through a variety of processes, but I guess the focus is around the psychology of leadership and change and how people manage change. And your book, Changes, The Busy Professional's Guide to Reducing Stress, Accomplishing Goals, and Mastering Adaptability, covers a lot of those aspects. Now, before we start talking about all things change, how did you get into this area? Were you always in kind of leadership and leadership consulting?
Hmm. Yeah, in some way, I've always been fascinated with how human beings create change, whether that's in the organizational sense at a large scale at the human system level, or at the individual level. And when I was in college, my thought then, years and years ago, was that I would get a master's or PhD in industrial organizational psychology, which I know a lot of your audience knows what that means. For those that don't, it's basically looking at what are the human dynamics, the practices, the processes in an organization that influence its success. So what is the people side? How does that influence an organization's success? And so that was my plan in undergrad, and got all the internships and study relevant to that, and got a job in corporate out of undergrad that was kind of heading me in that direction. And immediately out of college, did a lot of account management and employee coaching and leadership coaching, career coaching. And that experience kind of inspired me to take a deeper dive into the hows and whys of what we do as human beings and how we create change. And so instead, I actually went back and got a master's in counseling, and then became a licensed therapist, and lived in the mental health world for a number of years, and did everything from private practice to worked in the hospital systems, the jail systems, led teams of therapists, really a wide variety of roles in the mental health system, and really got to see how human beings create and maintain change in a wide variety of ways. And so, everybody from, kind of dealing with regular transitional issues. And what I mean by that is things like, birth of a child or divorce or changing careers or moving, things like that, to stress, to anxiety, depression, addictions. And then also worked with clients that were faced with really severe and persistent mental health disorder. And so those that were questioning what their reality was, or dealing with really, severe mental health issues. And so had a great experience, learned a ton, and, still, Jurgen, had this interest in human systems and business and the corporate world. And so I made a pivot back to that world a handful of years ago, which was a great experience for a few years, working corporate again, doing a lot of training, a lot of leadership coaching, a lot of content delivery for organizations, and then went off on my own, started my own practice about 5 years ago. And so a windy road to get to where I am. But I will say that, all along the way, looking back over the course of, 15 plus years, it's all been in the context of helping people, individuals, teams, or groups, large groups, create change. And so, a lot of commonalities amongst all those experiences.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I'm fascinated. You talk about a lot about creating change,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, because I think there's kind of two ways to look at change. There's change that happens around us in our environment, and then we can react to that change, and some of us react to that change by resisting it, or by pushing back, and or we can create change to be very very intentional about bringing about change because we're unhappy with something in our present situation. So, speak to us a little bit about that dichotomy of kind of creating change versus reacting to change.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this. I'm really passionate about this idea, and I think it's an important one for all of us, because we're all, I think, always in one of those two spots. We're either managing a change that's coming at us, which we can all appreciate from this last year, which has been
Yeah.
tremendous amounts of change, or we're likely also asking the question of what can I create in my life? What do I want, right? We always want something. It's either, better relationship, better health, more money, move to a different place, better career, whatever it is. There's always something that we want. And so, you know, thankfully, my experience and the research supports this, is that whether you're wanting to create change or you're responding to it more effectively, there are key indicators that are involved. And my opinion and experience is that it's all about evaluating the totality of our lived experience and how our key influencers of our lived experience creating, again, our ability to either manage change or create it. And so I think that we can get lost when we don't evaluate the totality of our experience. And what I mean is how our thoughts influence things, how our environment influences things, how our physical health influences things, right? How our level of courage. And these are just a few of the key predictors. But I think that's often the opportunity, is to lean into what are these influencers in our lived experience that are influencing us in both directions.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. How much do you think our core values play into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of a handful of influencers. I think I would bucket values under the context of belief systems, right? Like we gain belief
Mm.
systems or value orientation from a number of places, from our environments as children, from our parents, from our, family of origin, from our workplaces, right? These things are consistently built upon, and one of the opportunities I think with value or belief systems is that they are continually evaluated, right? Meaning that we might have a value orientation or belief system that's serving our ability to create change or manage it. Or the opposite might be true. We might have a value or a belief system that's hurting our ability to create or manage change. And so that's a great example of what I'm talking about, is that, it really benefits us to evaluate these key aspects of our lived experience to determine, are they helping us or are they hurting us?
Hmm. So what are some of the things we should be doing there? I mean, it strikes me that the curiosity is a big thing in this, to sort
Mm-hmm.
of be curious about, well, why am I resistant to this change, or why, or maybe even stepping back one level and say, why am I unhappy with this situation right now? What's driving that? Is that how you see it? Is curiosity really important there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think curiosity is paramount to evaluate what's influencing us. And again, this curiosity should span all aspects of our experience, right? Across our relationships, our belief systems, our physical health, and our frame of mind. We see in the work that we do. We work with a lot of organizational leaders and teams, and a good example of leaning into this curiosity is that there's a lot of research around how a healthy system, a team, a family, an organization flourishes, and what are the aspects of it that really create poor systems, right? And so one of the things that we know about healthy human systems is that psychological safety is one of the aspects that creates thriving human systems. And so for some organizations that we go and work with, that's a real surprise to them, right? Because that's not maybe in line with their value system. Their value system might be more dominating, or might be more top down mentality. But that kind of system is often creates fear, right, or disconnect,
Mm.
or suspect, right? And so for some organizations that we worked with, it's a surprise to learn what the research tells us. But the reality is, unless we're curious enough to say, oh, this value system that I had maybe isn't the best one for the results that I want, right? Then we're not going to be able to achieve those results if we hold so tightly to our current belief or our current value system.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned fear there, and I know you talk quite a bit about um, the aspect of thinking and feeling around change, and around where we might find ourselves in our current situation, and
Mm.
how that might drive our intent to make change, or our desire for change. But um, it's really, one of the things you said, it's the actions. Unless we take the actions, that nothing's going to happen. So we can kind of sit in the um, middle of the track, right? And if we don't
We can.
move, the train runs us over.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. In the book that I wrote, there's a story about an individual, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, Jurgen, and I'm sure a lot of listeners can. And this story is about a very high, and it's a fictional story based on some truths of folks that I've experienced over the years. But the story is about a high performing executive who is always wanting more, right? Always wanting more out of their employees, always wanting more out of themselves, and just a real driver. And in this story, they're always reading the latest, self-help book, the latest leadership book, the latest, tip and trick around how to create change. But in the story, that's all they really do is they pursue all this education, right? They go to the conferences, they read the books, they read the blogs, they listen to the podcasts, but they don't really apply it to their own life, right? And so they're setting all these high expectations for themselves and others, but they're not taking the action to implement or operationalize the lessons that they're learning along the way. And so exactly to your point, that unless we really bring these lessons to life, they're not really going to take us very far, right?
Mm. Mm. So what's your recommendation? I mean, there's a couple of questions come up there, so I'm just thinking which one to
Yeah.
pursue first. But what's your recommendation there? I mean, there's a lot of people I know, and certainly I'm one of those people that are lifelong learners and are really excited by here's something new I can learn today. What's your recommendation to find that balance between, okay, there's something new I've learned, how do I bring that into my own life, and then how do I help other people bring that into their life or their business? Because I think one of the things you said there is kind of, until the leader themselves takes that on board and starts to practice that and model that, it's
Mhm.
unlikely that they're going to get their team to
Right.
do it. It's like, do what I say, not what I do.
Yes. Yeah. So just to be clear, so you're asking like, how do you strike the balance between
Yeah,
continued learning and, applying the learning, right?
that's right.
Yeah, it's a great question. And to be honest, I struggle with this too. I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, we're all, susceptible to the shiny object syndrome, right? Like we like the tools, we like the tricks, we like the latest and greatest. And so I'm certainly in this camp somewhat. And so, but what I would say, I would answer your question to say that, I think as leaders, like you said, we have to be able to walk the walk, right? We have to be able to be doing what we're saying is necessary for a healthy team, a healthy culture, a healthy organization. And a way to evaluate that is to consistently get feedback, right?
Mm,
To say to my team, to say, hey, here's the thing that we're working on. And for the purpose of this conversation, let's say the thing that they're trying to improve is communication amongst the team, right? And so as the leader, they might, create some kind of cadence or frequency in which they're checking in with the team about how is the quality and frequency of the communication, right? So they're getting feedback before they move on to the next thing. And maybe the next thing is, delegation, right? So before we move on to whatever the next hurdle is for us, let's make sure we're doing well in the current objective. And it's not to say you can't work on more than one thing at once, but I really believe and see the power of consistent feedback amongst really any human system, whether it's a team or an organization or even a family, right?
mm. Yeah, yeah, that's take it one piece at a time, which is is one of my favorite mantras. If you feel overwhelmed, then break it down into smaller pieces.
Yeah, exactly,
Mm.
exactly. And then that might be one of the outcomes of getting feedback is to say, hey, we've bitten off too much here. Let's break it down, or let's meet more frequently, or let's decide on different key performance indicators, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
All right. The other thing that came up when you were talking to me about what leaders can do to kind of deal with change or create change or create an environment of change in their organization is that when you're telling that story about this leader who wanted more more results, more money, more
Right.
f- higher performance from their team and so on. There were two thoughts I had really. There was, the one thought was, well, everything seems to be geared to and away from target. So what I've got now is unacceptable. I want it different, but that different isn't defined. And then the other thought was, not having the target defined is kind of like that perfectionist trap. So it's never going to be good enough. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for any of us, whether it's an executive team or a team of an organization or an individual, right? When it comes to change management, it's really helpful to identify what does success look like? What is the future? What is the most ideal scenario look like? And we certainly know at Arc Integrated, my practice, we certainly see this not happen sometimes, right? The path to success is not clearly articulated. It might just be we want things to be different. But yeah, identifying what does success look like, and then being able to break it down to what are the barriers or what are the inhibitors. And again, I still come back to this, evaluating the kind of holistic sense of our lived experience can be a resource in two ways, right? One way is that it can help identify what are the hurdles for us, but it can also help us think through what is it that we truly want? What is it that we truly, want in our life, in our business, in our team, in the culture of our organization, right? When we really begin to dig into, all the aspects of our lived experience.
Yeah, fascinating. So, what can we learn then as an individual around making change that can then apply to making change at scale? So, making change in our organization or in our workplace, and I'm thinking in terms of every individual there, not necessarily the person who's the leader in the organization and who mandates change, if you like, from the top down, but somebody who might be in um, a, a role that doesn't necessarily have reporting relationships or so on, but has a contribution to make in terms of changing something in that workplace. What can we learn in terms of individual change and then applying that change to an organization and scaling that?
Yeah, so there are these 7 influencers, which I often refer to, that are these 7 areas of our lived experience. And to be honest, I could take each of them and talk about how they're relevant to the individual and how they're relevant to the organization's success. And so I'll take 2, for instance, right? One of these influencers is heart, which is our emotional self, right? So our emotional self is all about understanding, are there any resentments or hangups or things that maybe we haven't dealt with emotionally that are contributing to the hurdles that are created in our life against what we want to create? Or in the context of responding to change, maybe it's our emotional self that could be getting in the way, that when change comes at us, it's disrupting and it's irritating and it triggers us and evokes anger, right? And so there's an emotional aspect that might need to be resolved in order to get access to the best results, you could say, right? At the individual level. Now you take this dimension, heart, this pillar, this influencer, take this dimension, heart. And so you apply that to the organization, and there is a ton of data, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, and listeners can as well, around the fact that emotional intelligence is one of the most key predictors of success within the context of leadership. If you look at the emotional intelligence data and compare like leaders that have really high EQ to those that don't, the leaders that do, they make more money, they're more influential, they're more followed by employees, they inspire more trust, more accountability, higher results. And so that's an emotional aspect too, that again, all the research points to at the organizational level, that when we increase our emotional intelligence, we get better results. And so that's one of the dimensions kind of applied to both individual and organizational health. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's quite helpful. And there's a um, lot of talk that I hear right now around you need to work on yourself first. You need to sort out your own stuff first before building a business, before entering a relationship, before making big changes in leading a team. And I think what you're saying there is very consistent with that, isn't it? It's unless you're really clear about your own baggage that you're bringing along and how that influences you, and if you're not prepared to let go of some of that baggage, then that's going to be a major barrier.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yes, I totally agree. And to add a layer of complexity, one of the other influencers that I see play out so much in the work that we do is courage, right? Which we call guts in the 7 of these influencers.
Hmm.
And so, that to me, Jurgen, connects to the idea that yes, there's always things to work on, and it's really important to take risks. It's really
Mm.
important maybe to start before we're ready. And that idea doesn't apply to all contexts, but I think in the culture that we live in, it applies more than it doesn't apply. I think we are, as a human culture, often more nervous, more fearful, more resistant to take risks than we are okay to take risks. And so that's why I include it as one of the major influencers, because it comes up for all of us.
Mm. Yeah, I might explore that a little bit further with you, but one thought I had there, and it probably talks to risk, is the role of vulnerability and the preparedness to be vulnerable particularly in, say, a corporate environment that
Hmm.
tends to be pretty rigid at times, or pretty cutthroat, perhaps. Um, you talked about courage as well. What's your take on the whole idea of being vulnerable, and how might one go about that in a way that you still come across as strong,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
at the same time empathetic, and building those human connections?
Yeah, I hear that a lot, that the question of, well, if I'm vulnerable, then people won't take me seriously, or if I'm vulnerable, they won't see me as a leader or whatever. And um I certainly don't hold that belief, and all of the research points to the fact that, if we know the largest predictor of success of any system is psychological safety, and again, the system of the business, whether it's a 10-person mom and shop or it's a multi, tens of thousands global corporation, psychological safety being the number one predictor of success. If we know that that's true, and we know the science backs it up, then to me, we should all be taking more risks in our vulnerability than not. Because if we think about how to build safety, one of the ways to do that is we create connections with other people. We create trust, right? And then the question is, well, how do we create trust? And one of the ways we can create trust is we can offer trust, and we can offer trust through being vulnerable, right? We can offer trust through, exposing our own humanity a little bit. And, being vulnerable doesn't mean necessarily that we're always leaning into our weaknesses, right? Being
Mm.
vulnerable could be as simple as, I don't have the answer to that right now. Let me get back to you. Or it could be as simple as, there's someone else on the team that knows this thing better than I do. Let's ask them, right? That's vulnerable.
Mm.
Vulnerability could be, hey, let me share with you what I did over the weekend. Vulnerability could be, going to someone else in your group and, having a difficult conversation that maybe you've avoided for weeks, months, years, or whatever it is. So there's all sorts of ways to be vulnerable and create trust that don't include just leaning into, our weaknesses, so to speak.
Mm. Yeah, I love what you said earlier there. Offer trust to get trust, or earn trust.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's
kind which is the vulnerable thing, right? Take the first step forward to the line in the middle, rather than wait for the other person.
Yeah, and it is. And I mean, to your point, it is a risk. When we do that, that other person might not meet us in the middle, right?
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
the risk. So yeah, I don't want to downplay the risk, but it is there, certainly.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I've learnt, in a philosophy that I've kind of developed over the years, and I didn't always think this way, but is giving without any expectation of something in return. So I tend to talk about this quite a bit in terms of um, the marketing journey, or the customer journey, and saying, well, what can I give my the people who are interested, the people who've kind of taken a look at my website, for example, what can I give them, just upfront? Thanks for
Yeah.
dropping by. Here you go. And if you don't have any expectation of anything happening in return, then you don't get disappointed. So it's actually a lot easier to give them something, and I treat it as a gift. So if you give somebody a birthday gift, you're not expecting anything in return. So and the crazy thing is, people sense that. People sense when you're actually being generous, as opposed to giving them something with a calculation in the back of your mind as to what's the return of that going to be. And so the results actually turn out to be a lot better in that. And I'm guessing that probably applies to the trust thing as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say that's another way to be vulnerable, right? Is to
Mm,
give without expectation, just like you're describing. And also when you describe that, it also makes me think about how there's so much more going on when we connect with each other. You mentioned like people can sense that energy, right? That element that we're bringing that might not be spoken, right?
mm,
That unspoken intention that we have, people can sense that. And yeah, it reminds me of the quote, that I'm sure a lot of folks have heard, but oftentimes we don't remember what people say, but we remember how
mm.
we felt in their presence. I think that's what you're speaking about. The level of our intention creates a resonance that people pick up on, and it's an important thing to remember.
Mm. All right. Well, one of the things I was going to explore with you, and I mean, it's kind of ever present in this day and age, right? For the last 8 months or so, is the COVID situation and how we now find ourselves in various stages of not being able to travel, not being able to host in person events, not being able to meet with people in person. And, and that's obviously forced us to change a lot of the things that we do, or a lot of the ways we do business, and so on. What are some of the things leaders should be doing in particular right now to manage that change, to be ahead of the game, if you like,
Mhm.
and to support their teams?
Yeah, great question. I'm really passionate about this idea of continually improving our ability to adapt. We certainly, like you said, we've been faced with a bunch of chaos this year. And, if you look at the research around the rate of change and our ability to adapt to it, the rate of change is way higher currently than our ability to adapt. And, all signs point to the fact that, the rate of change is going to continue. Hopefully it's not another pandemic, but certainly it will be something. And so, to lean into our ability to adapt and manage change, to me, it's the most important skill. It's the most
Mm,
important skill because it's what we can count on, right? And
yeah.
we can count on continued change. And so, a couple of the things that we've seen at Arc Integrated that leaders have done really exceptionally, some of the folks we've worked with, is that they've leaned into their respective business ecosystems to understand what their ecosystem needs, right? So we've done a couple times hosted events for folks where they've brought together a number of folks from their industry. So think about a company that has employees, they have vendors, they have other folks that are connected to their business ecosystem. And so we've hosted events where they've come all together in a virtual summit, so to speak, and just asked the question of, how can we support each other? How can we be innovative and disruptive during this time? Like, what is available to us now that maybe hasn't been before? And so I think, that, Jurgen, is a real opportunity for all leaders to continue to do, is to crowdsource the wisdom around the folks that are in their business ecosystem. And one of the clients that we've served in the last bunch of months has actually, through that, made a pivot to now move into a new industry because they listened to the feedback that they got from the folks in their industry. And so now they've created like another income source for themselves via the feedback that they got from folks in their industry. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in that.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. That's kind of like a almost a virtual town hall, isn't it? From of a
Absolutely.
bunch of folks, and then I guess the key thing is asking lots of good questions in that environment.
Yep, absolutely. And I think also leveraging the diversity that's available to you, right? And so, you know, it, diversity meaning different players within the ecosystem. Like I said, different kinds of employees from the company, different vendors, different strategic partners, different folks that that might even be your competitors. How can you use this time to create not more competition, but maybe there's a way to innovate that creates more win-wins for folks, right? Maybe through this there can be even less competition. And so, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, which I know, we're hearing a lot about in a lot of sectors right now.
Hmm. Yeah, and in some ways, what you said earlier about change and our always improving our ability to deal with change, to adapt to change, and even to create change.
Hmm.
Um, it reminds me, it doesn't have to be a pandemic. It doesn't have to be a disaster. Going back, one of my very early experiences in the corporate world was the birth of digital photography when I was working for one of the big photographic film manufacturers,
Yeah,
and thought I'd landed it big straight out of the university because I'm a real keen, passionate photographer, and thought that that's the industry I want to be in. And of course, the industry was disrupted within the space of about a year when I was there, and I observed from the inside how in the company that I was at, which was ACFA, how they at first reacted to that like chooks with their heads cut off, running around like crazy, not knowing what to do, and
yeah,
then sitting back and saying, "Well, actually, it's not that bad. It's not a real threat." and
yeah,
um,
yeah.
and there's so many stories of that, of technological advances or manufacturing advances or whatever it might be, innovations coming in that disrupt an industry where people are not able to deal with that change. So I think there's lots of lessons we can actually take out of the pandemic where we've been forced to adapt to change because it's threatened our very survival, our health.
Mhm.
And perhaps we've taken that a lot more seriously than when it just threatens the business.
Yeah, and I think to that point, we're going to see as time passes more and more of that. Meaning either companies that adapt quickly and lean
Mm,
into change, or those that are frozen or stuck or reactive to it and thus fail. Right. And it's due to this fact that the level of change that we're seeking or that we're experiencing is going up at such a rapid rate. It's going to kind of force organizations and industries to adapt at a more rapid rate, or they're going to move to failure because they'll be in a
mm,
position where there has to be one or the other. And so, yeah, and then to tie it back, Jurgen, to these influencers we were talking about earlier, these seven. Another one is cognition, which is mindset. And I would bucket this idea of mindset, both at the individual and the organizational level, as this predictor of adaptability or failure, right? So for the organizations that adapt quickly, they have a mindset of abundance, of curiosity, of thinking quickly, of opportunity, of forward facing, right? That's a mentality. And
mm,
then, for those of individuals or organizations that have mentalities or cognitions that aren't serving us as well, those mentalities might be around competition, or they might be around scarcity, or they might be around, that there is not opportunity, right? So thinking about what isn't, or where the problems are rather than where are the solutions, right? Those are all mental frameworks. And so again, to tie it back into these seven influencers, they exist at the individual and at the large system level.
mm. Yeah, yeah, and that mindset one is really key, I think, because you use the term cognition, and it's really, you see what you focus on. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like the analogy of, you go into a dark room with a flashlight and you point the flashlight in the corner. Well, you might see the spider that's building its web there in the corner, and you might get freaked out, but you don't see the treasure in the other corner that can set you up for the rest of your life. And
That's
you
exactly it.
run out of there and say, that's a bad place to be.
Totally, totally.
Mm.
Yeah, we need to have bright and shiny flashlights and make sure we're examining the whole room, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
All right. Well, this is fascinating, Michael. I could go on for ages talking about change and all the factors predicting how we create change and so on. I guess there's kind of one thing, and we might get to this in the parting thing, but just coming back to this idea of creating change versus reacting to change, and also the resisting. So,
Hmm.
how in an organization, for example, when somebody's trying to create some change or lead some change, and they come up against this resistance, what's your recommendation?
Well, I think it really depends on what is their level of influence. So, it reminds me, we did a training just this last week, a 3-day emotional intelligence training for executive group. And one of the things that we talked about around how to influence, right, regardless of what your level of authority is the idea of adopting a coaching mentality, right? Or increasing our ability to be skillful coaches. And there's all sorts of resources out there, and I can name a few if people are interested in diving into, like, how might I be a better coach? How might I ask more questions? How might I ask better questions? How can I increase my influence? And my suggestion, if you want to increase your influence, get better at asking questions. So three resources come to mind. One is a book called The Mindful Coach by Doug Silsby. Another one is called The Coaching Habit. And what was the third one? I had a third one in my mind. I'll leave those two.
Okay.
As coaching resources.
All right. Well, we'll include those links in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah. I don't know the first one. I have looked at the second one. I haven't read it yet, but I've sort of got it on my list because it looks fascinating.
Yeah. They're both great to, again, equipped us with how can I think about ways to influence, and how might I put different hats on depending on the relationship, right? So if I'm wanting to coach up, for instance, if I'm wanting to influence a leader that I don't have authority over, how might I put on that coaching hat, ask better questions in order to do so? So yeah, good tools.
All right. Well, I think on the subject of questions, it's time for our buzz round, which is our innovation round designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. And there are 5 questions that I ask, and hopefully you'll give us a really insightful answer and inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result.
All right. I like it.
Yeah. So what do you think the number one thing is anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
To be more innovative. I would again lean into their ability to ask better questions, and be mindful of that. I like the idea that, or the quote, our words create worlds. Our words create worlds. And I can't remember who that quote comes from, but the questions we ask and the words that we use often influence the direction that's created, right? And so I would say spend more time on evaluating the language that we're using and the questions that we're asking. And I think part of that is a bit counterintuitive, only because when we want to innovate, or when we're in environments where we're being pushed to come up with answers quickly, it's not very conducive to spend more time on the questions. But that's my recommendation nonetheless. I realize the constraints around that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the book Questions Are the Answer. And I think, was it Hal Gregerson? I'm not sure of the author now, but it kind of delves into that whole idea of how to ask better questions and how to actually lead people and build connections through better questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another book resource, which is by a friend of mine, Chad Littlefield and Will Wise, Ask Powerful Questions, which is, again, another way to think about how can we be better as coaches, and increase our ability to be curious.
Great. Well, we're getting lots of books, so that's good.
Yeah, great.
Adding to our reading list. So what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
So there's a quote by someone named Josh Waitzkin, who wrote another book called The Art of Learning. And he has this. He's a martial artist, and I am also a martial artist, and so I really identify with his language around what I'm about to say, which is, he talks about the necessity of creating empty space, and that is the idea of not having really any agenda for anything. And so this could be sitting quietly in meditation. It could be going for a walk. It could be being in nature. Yeah, I think cultivation of that empty space leads to a lot of idea generation and a lot of innovation and creativity. And so I don't do that enough, but I know that when I leave room for it, or when I intentionally create empty space, there's value on the other end of it.
Hmm. Yeah, there's so many of our guests have said similar things in terms of
I'm sure.
allowing the mind to kind of just wander and
Yeah. Yeah.
dig below that surface of, the everyday stuff that's on our mind.
Yeah.
And I know, for me, that often happens when I'm out cycling, as my listeners would know, my regular listeners. A lot of people talk about uh, walking or meditating, or journaling is the other one that's very popular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll tell you an answer I'm guessing you have not gotten yet, which is which is I recently bought an instrument that has been extremely meditative for me, and it's called a hand pan. Have you heard of that before?
No, no. What's
Hand
handpan? Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should check it out. Do a YouTube search for it, or Google search. It's a very unusually sounding instrument, very melodic and meditative, and yeah, I've been enjoying that. That again puts me in that headspace that you're describing with cycling or
Yeah. Yeah.
walking. Yeah,
Yeah.
that same
Is that
path.
a string instrument or?
It's not. It's like a steel drum, and it
Oh,
has
okay.
various shapes on it. It's kind of bulbous looking, and it has
Hmm.
little indentations, and you strike in various spots around the drum, and it makes a different tone depending on where you strike. And so
All
yeah, it's
right.
been great.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll have to check that one out. You're right. I haven't had that one before.
There you go.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
For which, for innovation or creativity?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. I would say I'm a really big believer in the quality of our environments, of the people that we're around, influences us in all sorts of directions, and that's one of these 7 pillars that I keep referring to. And so I am constantly evaluating, like, who am I spending my time with, and how am I spending my time? The communities I'm in, the where I'm spending my time online, who I'm choosing to be around, and with what frequency. And what I know is that when I am around those folks in my life that are dedicated to their own development and to their own improvement and to their own support, mutual support of I'm supporting them, they're supporting me, so on and so forth. I know that when I am really intentional about that, there are great results. One of them being happiness.
Hmm.
It's just more enjoyable, and so I would say that is a great resource, is the relationships in my life.
Hmm. Yeah. And I have to say I think we're probably that's being highlighted for everyone a lot more these days when we see that it's harder to get together with people physically, and maybe some of us are struggling to make that really deep personal connection in phone calls or online. So yeah, the relationship's really important.
Fun note, just a quick note about that, Jurgen. We since March, myself and partners have hosted thousands of individuals from across the globe on various, virtual events. And these
Mm,
events have spanned from, like I mentioned earlier, helping companies or communities or conferences kind of crowdsource and decide where are we going to go in the future. They've been conference events, they've been corporate events, and most of the time we're helping a group solve some kind of problem, but we always ask them, what's been most helpful. And surprisingly enough, even though we're helping them solve big problems, the number one answer we've gotten from these thousands of folks is the power of the connection,
mm.
the power of the relationship. That is by far, when we look at the feedback over the course of the last 8 months, that's been the number one thing that people really appreciated.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I've seen that as well. I've been on quite a few online events because there's so many more happening now. There's so much more available to us, and also um, some online networking events that have been quite amazing. Now, I mean, I've been on some that have been less than amazing, but it's ordinary. But I think if people take the time to, and you're forced to actually change the way you have the interactions in big groups online, and if people take the time to design that and create an experience that adds value to everybody, it can be really, really amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. As I know you've experienced, because, I know we have some common connections that are really good at creating, high level, experiences, via these meetings. And I'm thinking about our friend, Curran, I know
Yeah,
he
yeah.
creates really, really high level, experiential events that are based on human connection. And, I think that's a real opportunity for all of us that are in the facilitation space right now, is to host these experiential events online, because as we both know, and I'm sure the listeners can appreciate, there is so much being done online right now that is one-way information dissemination
Mm, mm.
or one-way communication. And the reality is that we don't learn most effectively that way. We don't engage most effectively. We don't come away with a lot of great insider experience. And yeah, so anyone in the facilitation space right now, there's a ton of opportunity on the table, I think.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a project or a client on track?
Hmm. I think I'm always asking the question with clients. We do a lot of executive coaching, we do a lot of training and development and facilitation work. And I'm always asking the question of, what did you love and what would you love to see more of? Whether that's at the end of an event, an end of a contract, getting ready to talk about the night. Like, I'm having a lot of conversations right now about 2021 contracts. And that's part of these conversations. Is I was just on one today. What did you love about this last 12 months in our time together? What did you see most impactful? If you had to name just three things that moved the needle for you or your organization based on our work together, what would they be? What do you feel is still needed? And bucketing that, of course, in the context of the work that we do. So yeah, those are a handful of questions that I'm consistently asking.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's good. It comes back to that idea of asking better questions
Mhm.
and having that level of communication with a bit of vulnerability, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. Because to that point, it might be that hey, Michael, I know we agreed to this in February, but we'd love to see more of this next time. And that's great. Like, if there's a client that's willing to tell me or partners that, hey, we loved this about what we did together, but we really would love to see more of this. That to me tells me we have a good relationship. If they're
Mm,
willing to give that kind of feedback, to say that, this is an area that could be improved, that's awesome. That tells me it'll be a longer term client.
mm.
Hmm.
Great. All right. And what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Mm. Yeah, I guess that's a difficult question, in the context of, not, at a highest level, what can someone do? Because of course that's going to be dependent upon the areas of experience and the niche that they're in. But I guess I would say to lean into what they're most passionate about, that intersection of passion and strength and what they can get paid for.
Mm,
To lean into that intersection, because I think what's at the heart of that intersection is likely what makes that individual unique. And so if we're talking about a solopreneur, entrepreneur, leaning into their own humanness and their own intersection of strengths, experience, and gifts, and what they can get paid for, that will inherently, I think, help them express what's unique about them and thus differentiate themselves.
mm. Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of comes back to not just not just taking like the idea of differentiation in a professional sense or in business sense, not just taking something that is completely outside of the business and not of value to anybody such that they'd pay for, but actually bringing those two things together. I think that's really core in terms of a business proposition that adds value.
Yeah, I'll give another resource too. There's another marketing person I really appreciate. The name Christopher Lochhead?
No, no.
He's great. He's worth looking up. He talks about, and I think others talk about this too, but the idea of category creation. So, meaning, how can you in your industry not compete as another person in the industry, but create a category that is different
Mm,
than what compete by difference, not by betterness, so to speak. And so I like that idea of differentiation too, is how can we create a category in and of itself in our industry, which is it's a big question to ask, but I think it's a great question.
Yeah. I think that's always a good kind of lens to look at things through, because I think that's where the opportunity is. It's kind of like, I don't have any competition because this is what I do. It's my own category, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Michael. This has been fabulous. Now, where can people find out more about you and maybe even get in touch to say thanks for what you've shared and also get a hold of your book?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a couple resources, and I'd love to give a gift to your audience too, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. So if they want to learn more about me or my practice, Arc Integrated, it's just arcintegrated.com, arcintegrated.com. And you can learn about executive coaching and facilitation and content delivery that we do to help, leaders and teams and cultures become and maintain peak performance. But in the spirit of asking better questions and having a tool for that, at the beginning of the pandemic, myself and partners at Arc Integrated asked the question, how can we be more generous with some of the tools that we have? And so we have this question card deck that we've used in facilitation of conferences and corporate events and such, but it's a physical card deck, and it's got 47 key questions in it that can help in group conversations and one-on-one conversations. You can even use it in solo. And so long story short, we created a digital version of that, and we're just giving it away so that, again, we can create better conversations in these virtual experiences that we're having. And so for folks that want to check that out, it's just virtualchanges.com. It'll take you to a Google slide deck with a bunch of questions and some instructions on how to use it. And please feel free to use it and share it. And I hope it's really valuable.
Well, thanks, Michael. That's very generous. And also we'll have links to those in the show notes and also to your book as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Now, do you have any parting advice today for our listener?
Yeah, I'll reiterate this idea of, leaning into getting better at change management, meaning both, how do we get better at seeing that change is both can be created, we can be the creators of change, and that we can most effectively respond to change when we evaluate all these important aspects of our lived experience, our thoughts, our behaviors, our courage, our environments, our hearts, our mindsets, right? All these things, looking at our lives holistically so that we can both respond more effectively to change and that we can create it more effectively. That's my invitation.
Great. Well, I love that. All right. Now, finally, who's someone else I need to get on the podcast and why?
Oh, okay. I like that.
You mentioned Christopher Lockheed, so maybe we'll check him out.
I don't have a relationship with him. He's great. I can't. I don't have a connection necessarily, but I tell you, the other guy that I did mention, Chad Littlefield, he's awesome. He's brilliant, and I'd be happy to suggest him and even offer an introduction. He's
okay. Well, yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so we'll reach out to Chad and we'll have him on the show and have that conversation. Sounds fascinating, and we'll see what we can do about Christopher Lockheed. I might check out his book, and maybe start a conversation.
There you go. That sounds great.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Michael, for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today. I've really enjoyed our discussion. It's been full of changes and full of inspirational challenges, I guess, in some ways, to us all to be much more self-aware and much more confident in our ability to actually create and lead change, as well as improving our ability to respond to changes happening around us. So thanks for sharing all of that, and all the best for the future, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jürgen. It was a pleasure to be with you today, and I look forward to staying in touch.
I hope you enjoyed that engaging and thought-provoking conversation with Michael, and there was something that you found valuable in this episode. There were so many valuable insights I found about change, about our ability to create change and to adapt, and how to earn trust quickly. I'd love to know what you took away from Michael's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Michael Diettrich-Chastain. That is MICHAEL DITTRICHCHASTAIN. Yes, it's a long name. It's all lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Michael Diettrich-Chastain. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Michael there, as well as links to the ARC integrated website, the Changes book, the virtual change cards that we spoke about, Michael's social media pages, and the other resources we also spoke about in today's conversation. Now, if you like this episode, please go ahead and share it with 2 other people that you think it might help. Tag me in that share, and I'll reach out to you with a special surprise, just to reward you for helping other people with this valuable information. Michael suggested that we have a conversation with Chad Littlefield, author of Ask Powerful Questions, on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So Chad, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Michael Diettrich-Chastain. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got even more fantastic guests lined up, including feng shui expert Patricia Lohan and content strategist and writer Lacey Boggs. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.